movement of the 1920s was a wild, glittering rebellion, a time when women tossed away their corsets, hiked up their skirts, chopped their hair, and danced to the sound of newfound freedom, baby. It was an age of jazz and gin, lipstick, and liberation where youth dared to challenge the old world. But not every woman used that freedom to dance under the lights. While most flappers chased freedom under the city lights, one woman took their rebellion someplace much darker. They said the cult of the Great 11 danced naked under the moonlight, whispering to angels and sacrificing mules to chase away sin. They built homemade ovens big enough to fit a body in, and once they actually used one. 2 whole days they baked a poor woman alive, calling it a healing ritual. The smoke rose over the California hills, thick and strange and kind of corpsey smelling, while the neighbors swore they could hear singing, soft and sweet like a hymn gone wrong. It was the 1920s, darling, the age of jazz, gin, and good times. Somewhere between the flappers and the flask, dark rhythm was playing, kind that made your spine do the Charleston. To cut in, kitten. Name's Holly, the flapper girl who prefers her stories shaken, not stirred. Just a touch cursed. You stepped into the murder she-sha of my true crime nerds where the lipstick's red, the jazz is not dead, and every story's got a little blood on its hands. So grab your bead, fix your bob, and keep that flask handy. We're about to walk straight into one of the strangest, spookiest call stories the roaring 20s ever coughed up. Now let's begin our tale of greed, madness, and a mother-daughter duo who can make even the devil say, "Now wait a minute, ladies." Well, now, sugar, lean in close. This ain't the kind of tale you want to shout across the dance floor. The hills at the base of the Santa Susana Mountains might look all dreamy in the moonlight, but underneath that silvery glow, they've got secrets that still whisper through the trees. See, back in the early 1900s, those hills were crawling with more than coyotes and tumbleweed. They were a playground for cults. Not 1, not 2, but 4 cults, if you can believe it. All in the first 70 years of the century. Seems the desert air does something funny to people's heads. Right in the Santa Susana nose, just past the old Corriganville movie ranch. The strangest one of them set up shop. Said it was a place of healing, but the neighbors heard screams at night. Saw the glow of fires that never went out. People came up the dirt road and never came back down. Queen of the cults, as the papers would later call her, first hit the scene on August 2nd, 1881, born Matilda Jane Otis. Now, May, she wasn't one to waste time. By sweet 16, when most girls were still learning the Charleston of life, she went and got herself hitched to a man more than twice her age. Augusta Wyland, 40 and already meaner than bathtub gin gone wrong. Well, it didn't take long before May had herself a baby on the way. Little Ruth Wyland, born June 25th, 1898 in South Dakota. Not quite 9 months after the vows, if you catch my drift, but sugar, the marriage went south faster than a drunk on payday. May said Augusta had a temper that could peel paint off the walls. Rough hands, bad words, the whole tragic tune. 15 months later, she was back home with her mama, Matilda, a new stepdaddy, all wild-eyed and talking about a fresh start. This is where the story gets twisted, honey. When May met her next fella and decided to start gallivanting again, she left little Ruth behind. Only she just didn't leave her with her grandma. Oh, no. She let her own mama raise the girl as her daughter. So Ruth grew up thinking May was her sister and had no idea that May was actually her mom. May would dump men like she dumped bad moonshine with a grimace, a gag, and dramatic never again. May played musical husbands, switching partners like flapper dresses. But the 5th, that guy got himself tangled in her life and couldn't find the exit. She was able to scam money from all of her husbands in order to live comfortably. She felt very little love towards any of these men. It was about what they could give her. And May wanted a lot. May had a selfish purpose to serve, and when these men were no longer useful, they were discarded like bad trash. May began having an affair with a married, rich lumber tycoon, Fremont Everett, and managed to bamboozle lots of money from him. In 1915, she married her third husband, George Blum, who was a pedo, and she knew his history. She also had her daughter, Ruth, living with her again. Well, doll, there are stories that men did stuff to Ruth when she was little. May knew about it. And so maybe George wasn't the only predator in this family. George E. Blum used his skills as a musician, artist, carpenter, and singer to engineer many ways to get close to and work with children. He was involved in singing groups for children, sketch groups, orchestras, a home for boys, throwing kiddie parties, and writing books for children. See, back in 1912, Blum had been accused of molesting an 8-year-old girl named Gracie Allen. Before folks could even catch their breath, another little girl, Blanche Rowley, under 10, came forward with her own claims. The jury didn't waste any time. They found him guilty in 4 minutes flat on March 27, 1913. 4 minutes, doll. You could barely pour a cocktail that fast. A week before he was due to go behind bars, a panel of doctors decided he was sane enough to face prison. But here's the kicker, baby. On November 15, 1930, the newspaper reported that Blum had been pardoned by the governor. Just like that, free as a jazz tune on a Saturday night. And yet a couple years later, May scoops him up for a sale. Boy, she had a way of picking men. Meanwhile, her daughter Ruth is back in her care, growing up under a roof with a predator. Well, doll, by early 1916, May and her third hubby, George Blum, are sitting pretty in Portland, Oregon, listed in the city directory on 11th Street. George called himself a musician. Meanwhile, May and her daughter Ruthie are dipping their toes into the glitzy, unpredictable world of acting and movie making. While May was quite homely, Ruth was a stunner at her time with dimpled cheeks, large brown eyes, and dark hair. By 1917, Portland was practically buzzing. People whispered she was one of the prettiest young women in town, and let me tell you, that wasn't just idle gossip. So it came as no shock at all when Ruthie landed the starring role in A Nugget in the Rough, Portland's very first motion picture. A Nugget in the Rough premiered on August 5, 1917. Ruth appeared at the theater before the films were shown and was greeted with enthusiastic applause. After this, May decided her family should go to Hollywood because she felt Ruth could become a superstar in California. Right after they moved to Hollywood, George was arrested for attempted extortion against Amanda McMillian. He claimed that she had ruined his life when he was a boy living in their home. News coverage about the extortion attempts tells us that Amanda McMillian claims that she and her husband found George in Lincoln, Nebraska, living as a poor little boy, and took him into their home for a number of years. They eventually parted ways, and the McMillians moved to Los Angeles around 1918. Could it be that George Blum blamed Amanda McMillian for his sick attraction to children? Was the mother who adopted him a predator and made George a predator too? Well, anyway, this is where George parted ways from May and Ruth because he was incarcerated in San Quentin prison while they attempted to become big movie stars in Hollywood. However, Hollywood was full of beautiful women like Ruth that were all trying to become movie stars. The vivacious Ruth did land a few jobs as a Hollywood extra, but not enough to earn real money. Ruth started working as an exotic dancer. She had to make a living for her and Ma. There survives a photo of Ruth, and oh honey, it's a doozy. She's wearing nothing but a strip of cloth across her bosom, a pair of tight shorts, and a transparent skirt made of what looks like rope netting. Scantily dressed for that day and time. When the glimmer of Hollywood started losing its shine, May began to get that look in her eye, the kind of glint that said she was cooking up something wild. She'd strutted into Tinseltown thinking fame would fall into their laps. And when it didn't, and instead Ruthie had to start dancing in men's lap for money, well, May decided she'd make her own kind of spotlight, even if it burned a little too bright. May started reading the Bible religiously and talking about destiny, her destiny. She claimed she wasn't just meant for fame. Oh no, sugar, she is meant for something divine. She'd whisper about voices and visions, about heavenly missions and chosen callings. Hollywood had plenty of actors, but May, she was ready to play God's leading lady. And soon enough, she'd gather a cast of her own, not for a film, but something much darker. Something that would make every scandal sheet in town sit up and clutch its pearls. The world was jittery back then, full of folks whispering about the end times. Preachers on corners, prophets in tents, everyone and their granny swore Judgment Day was just around the bend. Right in the middle of it all, May started hearing voices. One night in 1922, she claimed a heavenly voice floated down from the clouds calling, "Ruth! Ruth! Ruth!" 3 times, clear as a bell in the fog. Wouldn't you know it? That's all it took. May and Ruth both swore up and down that the angel Gabriel himself had paid them a visit. Not with wings and harps, but as a blinding white light that filled the whole room. According to them, this divine visitor had big news straight out of the book of Revelations, chapter 11, verse 3, if you please. He told them they were the 2 witnesses, chosen by heaven to warn the world that the end was nigh. Can you imagine, sugar? 1 minute they're chasing movie roles, and the next they're convinced they're starring in the apocalypse. The neighbors just thought they'd gone a little Hollywood, you know what I mean? But what was really happening behind those doors was something much stranger. After those so-called visits from the angel Gabriel, May wasn't just May anymore. Oh no, she had a mission, honey, and nothing on earth could convince her otherwise. She started preaching that she and Ruth were heaven's chosen messengers, sent to warn the world before the big finale, and the good Lord had made her a queen. So what did she do? Why, she turned that conviction into a big production. She called her flock the Divine Order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11. May and Ruth believed that they were appointed to write a book of divine knowledge that would be the companion to the great Bible. The book, titled The Seventh Trumpet of Gabriel, then later changed to The Great Sixth Seal, would bring about imminent apocalyptic events upon its publication. The book would also contain the location of hidden riches, oil deposits, and lost treasures. Sweetheart, if a book could show me where the gold's hid, I'd finally have a reason to finish one. But until then, I'll be jazz dancing my way through life. Oh, anyway, enough about me and my daydreams of treasures. Let's just get back to the real story. Well, now, doll, in order to write this fancy little book of theirs, May and Ruth needed some dough. And who better to shake down than Ruth's new boo? Fresh out of her first marriage, enter Arthur Osborne, a humble ranch hand with a heart full of hope and a wallet way too open for his own good. Arthur, bless him, asked his boss for a loan to give Ruth a little cash for the book. Ruth, of course, wasn't satisfied. She demanded more. The boss said no. Not only that, he then told Arthur he'd better pay it back or kiss that job goodbye. When Arthur, sweet and naive, asked Ruth to send him pages of this heavenly manuscript, well, he got zip, nada, nothing. Turns out neither Ruth nor May had actually written a word, despite their claims that the angel Gabriel himself was whispering every line. Poor Arthur lost his job, went looking for Ruth, and found not a trace. No forwarding address, no note, just the smell of dust and trouble. Shaking his head, he finally washed his hands of the whole affair and enlisted in the army. May and Ruth had in fact returned to Portland in order to gather followers for their divine order of the Royal Arms of the Great 11. May spoke loudly and confidently about having a direct line with the angels. Back in 1914, May's mother, Matilda, had married Walter Blackburn, bringing along his 12-year-old son, Ward. Poor Ward. Word on the street is that he was a little slow, functioning at a childlike juvenile level. When May and Ruth came to Portland looking for more followers, they recruited her mom, stepdad, and stepbrother, Ward, to become part of the cult. She not only recruited them, but May went and married her stepbrother, Ward, who was 20 years younger than her. Why not adding your brother onto my list of weird things to do in this story? Why not? May was 43 and Ward was 23. Ward would be May's 5th and final husband, and he was actually 2 years younger than her daughter. Ward had a long mustache and 5-inch long fingernails. Though never proven, rumors around Portland were that Ward was also a pedo. May figured that Ward would never want a physical relationship with her, which suited her just fine. As she was growing ever more adverse to touch, doll May wasn't wasting any time. She packed up her 15 loyal cult followers and headed back to Los Angeles, feathers flying and visions swirling. Stepdad Walter, bless his misguided heart, sold his grocery store back in Portland and plunked his savings into a tiny printing shop in L.A., all to churn out May's divine little books. But the return to L.A. wasn't just about presses and prophecy. It brought a new player into the drama, 19-year-old Samuel Rizzio, who somehow ended up married to Ruth on May 27, 1924. A month or two of wedding bliss, honey. 4 months later, Sam, he went missing. Disappeared without a trace, as if the night had swallowed him. Now, honey, word on the street that was often whispered behind closed doors, and that Sam was likely one of the many human sacrifices performed in May's twisted little kingdom. By 1926, there were around 100 cult followers. One cult member was Clifford Dabney, who gave May around $50,000, which in today's world would be very similar to almost $1 million. So a considerable sum back then. In return, he was promised to be among the first to see Blackburn's book ahead of publication, so he could see where the hidden treasures were located that May was going to reveal in this great book. Dabney also donated 164 acres of land in the Santa Susana mountain range. This is where they started building the commune, and it was called Heavenly Hamlet. But sugar, it wasn't the kind of heaven you'd want to visit after dark. First thing they built wasn't a home, but a temple, stuffed with what May called the Lord's furniture. Centerpiece was a massive golden throne, 800 pounds of gleaming madness with lion heads on each leg. Next door sat May and Ruth's cabin, sweetly nicknamed the Watchtower, though everyone knew it was more fortress than home. Below them, the stalls held the sacred animals, horses and mules, the ones that would be sacrificed. The cult gathered on a hillside to watch ritual sacrifices performed by their high priestess. The chants came at night, the fires burned low, and every so often one of those beasts would offer up their cries, echoing through the canyons. May had received angelic message telling her to buy 4 horses, one of each color, white, black, red, and brown. It was reported that these horses were not used for any type of work and were not to be sacrificed so they could live a well-cared-for life of luxury. They were the end times horses. She'd been needing those for long. May was leaving this world. Below the stalls were the cultists' cabins, which were generously described as simple structures that were perched precariously on the hillside. They also built a natural amphitheater called the Bow, where rituals were performed in the nude, and of a stone on which devotees stretched out to worship, again in the nude. May's husband, Ward, played a minor role in the cult. Ward's responsibility in the cult was very limited and didn't require a very high-level intelligence. He had 2 duties: standing on the sidewalk and counting cars as they drove past, and collecting rain in a coffee can to keep track of the weather. Although when they moved to the Heavenly Hamlet, there were not enough cars, so she switched him to counting trains instead of cars. Maybe it was May's way of giving him something to do so she could keep him out of the way. By now, May hated to touch anyone other than Ruth, growing more and more phobic of human touch. Now, between you and me, darling, May didn't exactly fancy her hubby's company in the bedroom department, if you know what I mean. But a man's got needs, right? So she commanded her lady followers to minister to him. Called it a divine sacrifice, can you imagine? There were even whispers, wicked ones, that sometimes her own daughter, Ruthie, had to attend to Ward's needs. Ruthie and May had already been with Ward anyway, since he was supposedly a pedo. Who knows? Weirdly, that May didn't want to be touched because she also invented something called vibrating kisses. In order to make the universe run smoother, everybody needed to be kissing everybody. Said it sent vibrations through space that brought the stars and planets into harmony. Ain't that a hoot? I don't know about the universe, but things sure got weird on Earth. The women were the important ones in this cult. They needed 11 queens. May and Ruth were 2 of those queens. Each queen was to be given 11 kings to have to themselves. May would decide what cult members could eat that day and how much. One family with small children was not allowed to eat for 4 days one time. Heck, some of the members were even chained to their bed for days, and that included even Grandma Matilda. Grandma didn't even get out of this. There was one episode where May commanded her mom to be chained and padlocked to her bed for 75 days. The cult leader would later claim an angel had told her that her mother needed to be kept on point in order for the stars to influence her fate properly. Followers were not allowed to have jobs outside the cult if they owned a business. It was to be turned over to May. May would provide everything for her members, she said, including food and shelter. In exchange, members would need to renounce all sources of money from the material world and then turn over their cash and paychecks to May. However, some of the members were allowed to work at a tomato packing plant not far from the land. May decided apples were the eyes of God. Can you imagine one little Granny Smith looking back at you from the fruit bowl like the Almighty himself? So naturally, she banned them. Said biting into one was an insult to the heavens because they were God's forbidden fruit. She didn't stop there, sugar. Oh no, she outlawed walnuts, Hellman's mayonnaise, and T-bone steaks. May said the T-bones weren't allowed because the T-shape was a symbol of the cross Jesus was nailed to, and it gave off, quote, a very negative harmonic. Honey, if a steak's the devil's work, then I'll see you in hell and I'll bring the A1 sauce. I get. Why walnuts, though? Well, according to the high priestess of Peculiar, walnuts could build invisible walls between her followers because of the wall at the beginning of walnut. Apparently, they caused spiritual disharmony. No nuts, she said. Well, sugar, there were so many nuts already in that cult, I suppose they didn't need any more of them. So I bet she was right about that one. Yep, she also said no Hellman's mayo allowed. Said the word hell was sitting right there in the name, and she wasn't about to spread damnation on her sandwiches. Claimed it invited dark forces to lunch. Then neighbors started gossiping that bodies were buried under fig trees on that land. Well, the neighbors got spooked and called the cops. Next thing you know, the boys in blue show up starting digging under fig trees, and all they found were dogs that had been sacrificed. Even after only finding dogs, neighbors still couldn't shake the idea that there were human bodies buried on that land. Sometimes odd mounds of dirt appear when no one had seen them before. Sickly smell would drift from the soil, making even the hardiest farmer wrinkle his nose. Children dared not wander past the fig tree, which the cult had given strange symbolic names. I mean, people were going missing, darling. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of leaves seemed to hint that the earth itself had absorbed something dark, something that perhaps no amount of digging could ever erase. Now, remember how we talked about Ruth getting married to 19-year-old Sam? Well, the story goes that Sam got mad at Ruth, slapped her across the face. The other cult members pretty much knew that was a lie because they were told that by May, but no one wanted to go against her because she was queen. Now, one of her followers just so happened to be a pharmacist. Handy little thing when your hobbies include prophecies and poison. So May waltzed right up to her and said, "The good Lord has spoken, Sam's gotta die. But don't fret, I'll bring him back to life." And then she asked for something that couldn't be detected in the body of a drowned man. Next thing you know, she's hauling the whole congregation down to Santa Monica Beach for a ritual. Picture it, doll. Moonlight dancing on the waves, a chill in there, and May strutting around in her robes like she's Queen of Atlantis. She had poor Sam dressed in ceremonial garb, then sprinkled poison all around him while he began to dance and kick up sand. She then had him spin around and repeat 10 times, "I am a dead man." And when the tide rolled back in, well, Sam didn't row with it. After that night, no one ever saw him again. And you better believe, sugar, nobody dared ask questions. When May said the Lord took him, they all nodded and kept their lips tight. He wouldn't be the only missing person to disappear in that cult. May believed that she had the power to heal and raise people from the dead, so death was just no big deal to her. But instead of raising the dead one by one, because why put in that kind of effort, she decided to build giant refrigeration units to house the bodies of the dead until the big event could occur, and then she would raise the dead all at once. As soon as Martha and William Rhodes joined the cult, May instantly loved their little adopted daughter, Willa. May's mother, Matilda, gave Willa 7 puppies when they arrived at Heavenly Hamlet. The family had come all the way from Oregon to join the cult. Matilda suggested the dogs be named after the 7 tones of the musical scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Sorry, that was bad. Willa was named one of the 11 queens in the cult because of her youth and beauty. She soon became May's favorite queen. Then Christmas of 1924 rolls around, and oh honey, things took a darker turn than seeing on Sunday. Poor Willa came down sick, bad tooth gone wrong, turned septic, the works. But May and Willa's mama, Martha, they wouldn't hear of no doctor, said the Lord was the only healer they needed. So there that poor girl lay, pale as moonlight, while the holy women prayed and preened around her bed. Then wouldn't you know it, on the very last day of December, little Willa sits right up, gets dressed, and even smiles. Everyone's giddy as a jazz band on payday, thinking the Lord had worked a miracle. But come New Year's Day, the good times fizzle faster than bathtub champagne. Willa's fever came roaring back, and May and her mama took her hand and said, "Don't you fret, sweetheart, you're going to die, but we'll bring you right back." Would you believe it, sugar? That sweet girl did die, trusting those women right to her last breath, believing she'd wake up reborn. May claims she got word from the good Lord that come Passover, Willa would be resurrected. They just needed to store the body until then. Willa was placed inside of a bathtub, and ice and salt was poured all over her body because May hadn't got around to figuring out how to make those refrigerator units yet. Imagine that. As if the situation was not gruesome enough, May then announced that Willa's head dogs were to be killed and placed next to their mistress's body. She explained the puppies were the hinges to Willa's heart and must accompany her in life and death. Willa and the puppies' bodies were later moved to a bedroom especially prepared as her sleeping chamber, so that the resurrected girl would find herself in pleasant surroundings when she finally awoke. May had fresh flowers brought to the chamber every day. Now listen close, doll, because this next bit will make your pearls rattle. There was a woman in the Heavenly Hamlet named Frances Turner, 30 years old, come all the way from England chasing hope and holiness, poor soul. She wasn't well, couldn't walk proper, couldn't talk at all. She was paralyzed, twisted up, coughing and choking near every day, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey. And May, that grand queen, she looks at Frances one morning with that ice-cold smile of hers and says, "The Lord has shown me how to ease your pain." Now, when May said she had a treatment, everyone knew better than to ask questions. She ordered most of the colony to clear out, said the air had to be pure, the spirits unclouded. Only a few chosen followers were allowed to stay behind. The rest were sent away and instructed to pray. That night, they fired up the big outdoor brick oven. You could smell the heat from a half a mile off. Burning wood, hot metal, and something heavy in there that didn't belong. Said the bricks had to stay red hot. So they swapped them out ever so often, new ones glowing like hellfire. Frances couldn't speak, couldn't scream if she wanted to. She laid there trembling, while May muttered her prayers and called it a healing. Just like all May's miracles, the ending was written for it to begin. Frances started choking, soft at first, then quieter still. They said it was the sickness leaving her body. An hour later, she was gone, burned to death. May told the others Frances had passed peacefully, that her soul had been purified in holy fire. The way she said it, sugar, like she'd done the poor girl a favor, chills me clear through my pearls. May knew she had gone too far, so she needed to get rid of the evidence. So picture it, a moonlit night, the smell of smoke still hanging there, and May batting those crazy eyes of hers, telling her flock to repurpose the scene of the crime. She had them tear down that oven brick by brick. What does she do with those fiery little murder stones? Build herself a walkway, honey. Cute little path right up to her front door. A walkway of bricks and scalded skin. Every day, those cult members marched across it like nothing ever happened. Clippity-clop, right over the same bricks that baked poor Frances Turner. Gives me the shivers just thinking about it. In September of 1928, Queen May pops up and says an angel told her to pack her bags and march 9 followers and 2 mules straight across the Mojave Desert. Says they're off to complete some kind of religious, mathematical concord. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like algebra with the heat stroke. It'd be hot there. She claimed this divine road trip was bound for a little place called Stovepipe Wells, a water hole out in Death Valley. The 500-mile round-trip journey took 14 days, which suggests the mules traveled on hoof most of the way, while the cultists sweated the journey out in one of the two vehicles taken. It would have been yet another surreal sight, courtesy of the Great 11. A car and a truck, both filled with sweaty cult members, driving at a snail's pace toward the Nevada border, a mule tied to each of the vehicles. Wouldn't that be something to see? There were reports later by non-cult members that an orgy happened at that water hole on May's orders. The two mules were killed as a sacrifice after they had this strange orgy. Police later thought the trip was taken in order to get rid of a body or two. Will and the puppies were kept frozen for more than a year, requiring deliveries of 600 pounds of ice a week. Man, how much would that have cost? It's probably broke. They was also tired of waiting for May to raise their daughter from the dead and decided it was time to bury her. She was basically mummified by this time. They had moved off of the land that the cult owned by now and bought a house, so the Rhodes decided to bury their daughter along with the 7 dogs beneath their bedroom floor, underneath where they slept. Because why not? Let's make it a little stranger. Word was that 3 more women were said to have went missing. Arlene Sartoris, Louis Foles, and Addie McGuffin. Arlene had come to the Great 11 after having been released from an insane asylum in Oregon, having both medical and mental issues. She died from allegedly either a gastric illness or heart troubles at Heavenly Hamlet. Some believe that May had poisoned her. Louis Foles was 29 years old when she disappeared. Louis was not a member of the cult, but her young son at the time said he had seen his mother being pulled into a large black car. He said it was a car very much like the one that May Blackburn owned. Now, Addie, she did belong to the cult. She was a cult widow who May called Dark Girl, and she was May's secretary. May told Addie that if the cult were ever raided, it was her job to hide the only draft of the important book, The Sixth Seal, that May was writing. She also disappeared from the cult. Years later, though, guess who turns back up? Addie, alive and living just a few miles from where the cult once cooked its crazy. Looked a little older, a little quieter, like someone who'd seen too much, wasn't about to start talking. Folks ask her about that book, The Sixth Seal, the one May said could save the world or end it. Addie just smiled, all tight-lipped and trembling. The book, she said? I don't have it. Never did. Remember Ruth's husband, Sammy, the one who gave her a slap and then vanished into thin air? Well, folks said he just skipped him, but not everyone bought that fairy tale. His kid brother Frank sure didn't. Frank had that look in his eye, the kind that says a man seen the dark and plans to stare it down. He figured May and her so-called angels had something to do with Sammy's disappearing act. So what does our brave fool do? He goes right into the lion's den, walks up to May, smiles real polite, and asks for a job. Her chauffeur, no less, said he just wanted steady work. But really, honey, he wanted answers. And May, that serpent in silk, smiled back and said, of course. For 10 months, Frank played servant to a saint of shadows. He watched her pray, preach, and plot, leading her flock like a spider humming lullabies in her web. Kept his head down but his eyes open, and one day, tucked away in the cult's quarter, he found it, Sammy's suitcase and clothes, folded neat, dusty but not forgotten. He then confronted May and asked her about it. Asked why Sammy's things were still there if he had run off like she'd said. She turned her head slow, that same little smile curling on her lips. Well, she said, soft as a grave whisper, maybe Sammy's coming back. Something in her tone, doll, it wasn't hope, it was promise. Frank told his mama, and that poor woman near lost her wits. The Rizzio's weren't exactly the church-going sort. Daddy was wanted for a triple homicide. Sammy was fresh out of prison himself, so the cops didn't much care for their kind. But Mama Rizzo had had enough of May's ghost stories. She wrote her a letter and said if she didn't get some answers, she'd go to the police. A few days later, there was a knock at the door. A policeman stood there, face pale, eyes cold as pewter. He didn't bring justice, though, just a message. Keep quiet, he said. In 1929, Clifford Dabney, accompanied by other members of the Blackburn cult, had grown weary of waiting for the publication of the Great Sixth Seal. He still had not received the location of the hidden treasure after donating tons of money in the land to the cult. So Dabney filed a civil suit against May and the Divine Order for defrauding him of $40,000. Clifford and the other members also started talking about the strange deaths and of the people that had gone missing. The police couldn't believe their ears when someone mentioned Willa Rhodes had been put on ice for a year after her death, and then for 3 years her body had been buried under her parents' house. So of course they headed over to the Rhodes home. Took a while to get the truth out of Willa's parents, but William finally decided the jig was up. Martha, cool as a cucumber, told her husband to head into the next room and lift this suspicious little trap door in their bedroom floor. William, poor sap, did what he was told, and the coppers shone their flashlights down into the pit. Dirt and cement hugged the boxes on all the sides, but the floor below was damp, either from sneaky groundwater or the ocean creeping in like a nosy neighbor. They started digging in sugar. Water had seeped in no matter how William tried to keep the coffins airtight. Both were half full of water. When they finally drained Willa's box, there she was, wrapped in a white blanket, all curled up on her left side like she'd just nodded off for a cat nap. But oh, that hair, soggy and floating at first, then draping over her face like some creepy lace veil. Gave the whole scene a real spine-tingling vibe. And then Sugar, the puppies, each little fur ball wrapped in its own white sheet, lined up like tiny, ghostly soldiers. Although Willa's body was completely mummified, these puppies' bodies were not, and they were horrifying looking. But because of the condition of Willa's body, it could never be proven that it was anything other than a natural death. On October 30th, just in time for Halloween, May Otis Blackburn and daughter Ruth were released on a $10,000 bail. Unfortunately, police were unable to cover any viable evidence regarding the disappearance of the 4 missing cult members, including Sam. Prosecutors also could not prove the allegations of a cult member's death from being baked in an oven. By 1931, all charges against May and Ruth were dropped. Grade 11 continued to exist a bit, though the publicity and scandal eroded membership and credibility, as you might imagine. Then in 1936, May decided to leave her mark in print. She published a book called The Origin of God. Honey, it was a mess, confusing, overstuffed with bizarre religious imagery, and as useful as a cocktail without gin. Didn't make her rich, didn't change a soul, just another odd little footnote in the long, creepy legend of May Blackburn. Commune rotted, fig trees twisted like blackened fingers. The soil still smelled of secrets nobody wanted to dig up. In May, she became a dark queen of her own making, a gal who danced with darkness, leaving whispers, chills, and a tale that'll make you think twice before wandering too close to strange hills at night. All right, kittens, that's all for tonight's dark little tale. Keep your pearls shining and your eyes wide. You never know what's hiding in the shadows. Holly the Flapper here, sending you a wink, a shimmy, and dazzling jazz hands. Only at the Murder She Shed.